Hi, this is Eric Payne from Brigus. Zebet asked me to send a video chat about Brigus and its culture to new Canadians, and I wish to say welcome to Newfoundland and Canada to all the new people that has come and bringing your culture and your ideas to a province that could use some insight and some cultural changes. So thank you very much for listening. Brigus is a unique town in Newfoundland that has been here since 500 years, but 400 years as a citizenship problem of people coming from all walks of life, from Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, France, Spain, Portugal, and they all came for the fisheries, and some stayed all summers to fish in the Grand Banks with our famous fishery, and others stayed and provided good jobs and businesses. Brigus was famous for its capital of captains. At one time, Brigus began by living in the outskirts of the points of land, and most of the fishery was done on the outskirts of the island in the headlands of, because at one time there was no mechanization to get out to the fishery except for rowing or sail. And so Bull Cove is one of the most famous ones because there was a gentleman named Thomas Uden who became a navigator, and he taught all the sea captains in Brigus and other areas to become captains due to his school of navigational school in Bull Cove. Our next community in was Frogmarsh, who was part of Brigus, but it was invaded because of the French wars between England and France. It was burnt twice and rebuilt. Brigus was also mostly in the inner harbor, was where the farmers and planters, that's what we called them in the old days, was planters, that they had plantations that fed most of the fishery crews, captaincy crews, however came to the shores of Newfoundland. And that was a big production of farms that used to be still used up until the late 50s. Brigus is a unique community due to its vast roads that are intertwining in circles, and it's one of the only villages of its type, except for maybe Trinity, that has a inner town that is well known. We were very political at one time with the different Catholic and Protestant and Anglican vying for power in a small community. It was a junction point of three religions in Brigus, and going towards Harbour Grace and further up, it was known to be Protestant, and then the other way to St. John's was Catholic. The thing was that the only Catholic enclave was in Harbour Grace, but Brigus had a unique ability to have three churches and in the community. The Salvation Army came in at one time and decided that they could not sustain their flock due to the three religions in the community, so they went to Notre Dame Bay. But getting off the subject of Brigus, I'm sorry, Brigus was so unique that we have been fishing and providing for our families by the fishery for 300 years or more. We used to go to Labrador to do our fisheries in the summer and come back in the fall to take care of the planting of the harvest. And at one time, that many times that in regards of the spring, 2,000 to 3,000 men would come in to proclaim of a sealing fishery that was very big from 1800s up until about 1920s, when oil industry that was first done in Mexico and the Gulf there in Mexico. And that changed the fisheries forever. Now, because we didn't need seal oil and whale oil to help work on the engines and jennies for the cotton factories in Europe, then they went into petroleum products. But that's another story. The story goes is that we were a great community of captains. At one time, even up until the 1820s, when my father was still alive, they used to be able to walk from schooner to schooner across the bay from Riverhead to the harbor. And it would be 170 schooners in the bay at one time, or many times in the fall and winter. And the procurement of great captains like Captain Bob Bartlett, who was a extreme navigator and explorer, who helped Perry get to the North Pole for the Americans. And he spent many years bringing people from New York City and all the more merchant people with their sons would come for a summer holiday, which is work experience on his famous ship to the Arctic. And my father actually worked for him when he was 14. That was his first time sailing, and he had sailed for many years afterwards. Brigus is also a community of where the women had signed their houses and the men proclaimed their names for the boats. So there's places like Dunmovin, Roving Over, Lakeview, the castle, many other houses. Even in the 1700s, we had lords and ladies from different parts of England to come to Brigus to go to the Pumrise and other prominent community people here in Brigus. But most of Newfoundland is built in the shoreline. That's where most of the communities are. Actually, all the communities are on headlands or islands around the Newfoundland coast. Newfoundland waters were the primary navigational people for great captains like Drake from Britain, and some people that Bligh even, who was in the great Captain Bligh of the Tahiti one that was. I'll get off the subject of that. It doesn't matter. Brigus was a country or town that had thought about politics. Even in 1890s, there was a conference by the St. George Lodge, and it was a Protestant organization that were debating for should we join Confederation or not. And of course, it didn't fly. Brigus was also possibly going to be the capital of Newfoundland at one time because there were so many prominent people living here with such political ambition. The thing is that Bonavista was chosen, Harbour Grace was chosen, Brigus and St. John's. Because Harbour Grace was 20 years while the provincial capital of Newfoundland, until they realized that they needed a port of ice-free port, so the capital was turned to St. John's around 1840. We also were famous in New Brigus is that we had the first three-mast schooner called the Three Brothers, who was built in Brigus itself, and we had other schooners that were built over the time. The shipbuilding prominently was built from 1750 odd to 1828, where the companies lost their two sons and the business folded due to unnecessary or inability to keep on building ships. And the structure and the slipway was there up until 1984, when a tsunami wiped it out and wiped out some of the infrastructure, wharves and other things around the community. That was unfortunate that we lost some of the history. But we have great artists that came here way back in 1914 or 1910 or so. That was called. He was famous, Rockwell Kent, and Rockwell Kent had a cottage here and became famous. And now the cottage is a heritage that can be used for anyone that has an artistic bent of art, poetry, whichever art you can come out and you can get a place to stay and study for, or paint, or do anything for a certain amount of time by the Heritage Committee of Brigus. We had policemen for the longest time in Brigus because of the influx of different times a year, from the sealing fishery to the fishery to the Labrador and to the harvesting of all the farms that used to be in the area. Culturally, Newfoundland is very diverse. Like we have, like I said, from all different countries and locations in Great Britain, France, Spain, Basque Country of northern Spain, all to make sure the procurement of the fishery, which was the most important thing of Newfoundland society. If you come to Brigus, you will find houses that have been here for over 100 years or more, maybe 150 in some cases. My house included is 140 to 150 years, which I was born in, and I'm glad to say that I was living here. But I went away for 40 years and came back to live in the house that I was born in. I jokingly say that I was told by a captain once that we were like, Newfoundlanders are like young salmon. We go out into the world and we come back to spend or stay after we have researched the areas of the world. We have very many people all over the world and fighting in our armed forces because we're proud Newfoundlanders. And in World War One, the Blue Patties was a very famous Newfoundland regiment who became royal after being in the battles of Vimy Ridge and Beaumont-Hamel, and is still a great force of working soldiers today that is carrying on the history of our, underneath now, the flag of Canada. Also, culturally, we are very different in accents. We have there's supposedly a couple hundred different accents around Newfoundland. We have the French influence, the Irish influence, the English, the Scottish, and we have a mixture of many different dialects that go with it. And Brigus is sort of a unique place due to its cultural and political influence of Brigus between 1840 and say 1935, before we became a responsible government. We always sent representatives to the Parliament in St. John's. We had, our water street was full of great interest. There was barrel making places that used to procure for the fishery, for the oil, the seal oil. We were great captains of that would bring in major amounts of fish that we would send over to Spain, England. Even one of our community members, Guzio, had married into the royal family of the Spanish throne at one time in the early or later 1800s. And his ancestors have come and have built in Brigus in a new house in Riverhead. We are changing quite a bit in regards of, we're getting more and more people coming in from away from St. John's and from other areas to either refurbish their houses or build them. So that is a wonderful thing for Brigus, and hopefully that will continue, because we have lost too many great buildings because of neglect, and you will see that all over Newfoundland. I would hope that your stay in Canada and Newfoundland in particular would bring in great cultural advantage to us Newfoundlanders of your food, your culture, your way of living, and hopefully will influence you into staying, and we can be great friends and help with anything that we can do, as in ZDUB has done for you, as in the newcomers in Canada and in Newfoundland in particular. I used to do a walking tour with all you famous or great people I went over the years, but this year is a virtual one, so I'm hoping that my little speech on Brigus. Brigus is also, we have a famous blueberry festival that started around in the early 80s, 84, I would imagine, and has continued on today. It was canceled the last 2 years due to the COVID, which is sorry. But we used to have people coming in. 15,000 would come in over the weekend to take care of the festivities and fireworks and music and culture and everything that was involved in having a great party in Newfoundland. We have it for 3 days, the second week in August, and I'm hoping that you will be able to take part in this next year if things get back to normal. Culturally, Newfoundland is very, like I say, is very diverse, and we could always use more influx of intellectual and understanding peoples. We have we have very few immigrants coming in, as you probably noticed in living in St. John's, but we hopefully to improve more and more coming in. So I wish you all luck. The people, I was told, asked about the people down towards different parts of Conception Bay. Like I say, the Catholics live down between Brigus to St. John's, and Protestants lived from Bay Roberts or from Brigus all the way to Old Perlican and further on up the coast. We have been going to Labrador for at least 300 years to fish, to hunt, to bring back provisions for our family. Up until a number of years ago, say in the 30s or 40s, there was only the merchant chits that would be given to the families of the workers that came back from Labrador, due to they always had to pay for their passage, their food, and whatever. And so there was a little bit of, there was actually no money available, but you would get chits to go to grocery stores or hardware stores or from different companies in the town. And the merchant mostly got the money's part of it. There's a story about a sailor asking for fish in St. Mary's Bay at one time, when the Americans were here in World War I, and he asked the fisherman to give him a couple of fish, and the fisherman gave him them, and he passed over 50 cents, and the man that was in his 60s had cried due to that was the first bit of currency he's ever received for his product. But getting away from that was, it was culturally very helpful to be, as a Brigus person, to realize that we have so much different cultural advantages because we're such a small knit Irish English community, that we have learned to get along, although it's been difficult because of the backgrounds that we all endured. When we first came over, people came over because they were poor in Ireland and other places, and to pay for their passage, they would have to do indentured labor for many years. So most of the rivers were rock walled, and you'll see rock walls everywhere in Brigus, which is unique. It's basically a Scottish English tradition of making their houses and roads and bridges and uh, riverways so they wouldn't flood, and which is very unique in Brigus. It has many streams that are fully rocked in walls, and it's rock walls for many different other places, even around the Anglican Church in Brigus, which is quite unique. We Captain Bob Bartlett's father had decided, because of the harbor was so influenced by captains with their schooners, they had no way to get their products in and out of their ships. That was by the tunnel. So the tunnel was created due to a man that was from Wales, who was a hard rock miner, and he had, where the Spracklin's house is today, built a cut in the rock to go down to his fishing area and Bishop's Beach. And when Abraham Bartlett, sorry, not Captain Bob's, but Captain Bob's father, seen this, he said, well, why don't, instead of having to go up and over and then down a slipway to the inner part of the town or the street, he decided to make a tunnel, which is very famous now in Brigus, known as the Brigus Tunnel. It's very long and very, very wide, and was hand drilled, and black powder and hot water and fire was used to break up the rocks. And as you see, if you walk through there, you'll see pit marks where they used the hammers to bore holes and then put black powder, as nitro and dynamite wasn't available until the 1880s, and this was done in 1860. Another thing about Brigus is that we have, right now we have a few restaurants, a few mercantiles, not as much as we used to have. One time we had, before supermarkets, we had maybe 10 different small shops that people have been buying their food and other supplies. And then with the amalgamation of schools and the lowering of children going to schools, we have decreased our schooling in Brigus, which we used to have 3 schools, and now there's 0 schools. We go down to North River and Bay Roberts and other areas to go to school, as our children will. We have a very small population. We have a growing senior population, which I'm one, but that makes the community more diversified, and we have more influx of summer people, who is keeping the town very much alive. And some young people are moving in with their families too, which is good to know. Brigus Blueberry Festival is the most famous. It was created and well established and very culturally. We have Legion Thursday night, where we have Newfie night, and then a free dance on Friday, and then a spectacular dance with bands and everything on Saturday. And of course the party in the park by the town hall, and that runs from Saturday and Sunday, and then fireworks commences. And here's a picture of the fireworks behind me that was taken by Bill Harris.